Self-control. The more, the better. By the end of this video, you might not be so sure. Hey there, Jessica here. I'm a licensed therapist based out of Austin, Texas. I make educational content related to my specialties, which are sleep, chronic pain, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and radically open dialectical behavior therapy, which is the topic for this video. So if you just found yourself thinking, what in the world is radically open dialectical behavior therapy? Stick around because that is what we're going to talk about today. So I opened this video by a little bit of doubt into this idea that there is no such thing as too much self-control. And I'm going to explore this concept a little bit from the perspective of a therapist. So for most of my life, I only ever heard self-control be praised. I remember learning in my first intro to psych class that delay of gratification was linked to better outcomes in life, and spent most of my career as a therapist thinking this way. So have you guys heard of the marshmallow test? Do you know about the marshmallow test? So let me know in the comments below what you think about the marshmallow test. And for those of you that are like, what the hell is the marshmallow test, Jessica? Let me tell you about the marshmallow test. How many times am I going to say marshmallow test? So there was a psychologist who did some experiments with kids where he offered them one marshmallow now or two marshmallows later. And so he said, you can have one marshmallow now, or if you're willing to wait until I come back, you can have two marshmallows. Some kids couldn't wait and ate the marshmallow. Other kids were able to wait and they got the second marshmallow. And I followed those kids throughout their life and came to the conclusion that the ones that were able to wait for the second marshmallow ended up doing better in life. So we thought, okay, case closed. We all need more self-control if we're going to do well in life. Well, we're starting to change the narrative on that a little bit. So it turns out that there is a point where self-control becomes excessive and starts to work against you. So even looking at the marshmallow test kids that were doing well, I wonder how they measured doing well. So maybe they asked them questions like, did you go to college? Do you have a career? Are you making a good salary? Or I wonder if they asked them like, are you happy? Do you have fulfilling relationships? Does your life feel purposeful? Because I could see a scenario where the kids were externally doing well, or I guess they're now adults. They were externally doing well, but internally they were not doing well. So I'll talk now about this idea of excessive self-control, how that actually shows up in the therapy space. So this shows up especially in some cases of depression, some cases of anxiety, certain types of eating disorders. So not everyone that's depressed has too much self-control, but a lot of these cases, particularly any that have been labeled treatment resistant, would have like too much self-control underlying them. And I also see it in a lot of the stuff that I work with in my own practice. So insomnia, chronic pain, obsessive compulsive disorder. I would argue that a lot of the people struggling with that also struggle with this too much self-control. I see some of it in post-traumatic stress disorder. I'd say it's about half and a half. People who experience trauma, some of them end up really too much self-control, and some of them end up like way on the other side of not enough self-control. And then, of course, radically open dialectical behavior therapy, which is what this video is today and is one of my specialties. So that old line about everything in moderation, that applies here too. So we can generally categorize people as leaning more toward an under control style or an over control style in terms of temperament, coping, just kind of how you show up in the world. And it's not inherently bad or unhealthy to be over controlled or under controlled. It's a matter of degree. And all of us lean one way or the other. Some people are going to be closer to the middle. Some people are going to lean a little bit more into under or over controlled. But for the most part, it's okay. It's not inherently unhealthy unless it gets out to an extreme. So people who lean more under control. You kind of think of these as people that are more emotionally expressive, people that get excited very easily. They tend to like being spontaneous and like spur the moment. And all that's good. But you can see how if we keep going on that line of emotionally expressive, excited, spontaneous, you keep going, and eventually you get into the territory of things like addiction, binge eating, impulsive spending, stuff like that. So that's under control. Over control people, people who lean that way, they tend to be more cautious, more reserved. They like to play by the rules. They like to do things right. And that's good. Until it isn't. And at some point, you lean so much into that, it starts to become a problem. And that's actually going to be the whole next section of this video. So again, let me know in the comments below, which way do you lean? Because we all lean one way or the other. Definitely lean more over control. And I guess I'll let you in on a little secret. Most therapists lean over control. Let me know below which way you go. So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the struggle points of people who lean too far into the over control territory. So in my world, we use the term maladaptively over controlled. So you can be over controlled and be perfectly happy, healthy, and then you can be maladaptively over controlled. So there are four key struggle points in maladaptive overcontrol, and you may not necessarily relate to every single one of these, and you could still be considered maladaptively overcontrol. So the first struggle point is in the area of receptivity and openness. So what does this look like? This can look like being very hesitant to try new things, or maybe just being a little distrustful of other people at first, maybe not being super open to new people at first. Or this might look like taking it really hard if you get a piece of corrective feedback, if you get a piece of feedback of like, hey, maybe you could have done this differently or this other thing differently. Maladaptive over control really takes that very hard and twists it into failed, it's a failure, this is terrible. I shouldn't have needed any feedback. If this was any good, I wouldn't have needed any feedback. So just a lot of struggle with being receptive and being open. And you can maybe start to see if this gets to be enough of a problem, it could start to create problems at work, in your relationships. So receptivity and openness, that's the first struggle point. The second struggle point is in what I'll describe as flexible control. So this can look like having a lot of difficulty in going with the flow. Like if plans change at the last minute, having a hard time kind of adapting and adjusting and orienting to the new plans. Or just getting really upset if things change at the last minute. You had these plans and then it changed, and it's really distressing. This is where perfectionism shows up, and perfectionism really can look so many different ways. You can be a perfectionist and have a messy house. You can be a perfectionist and not have your life perfectly together. You can be a perfectionist and not be like super successful. Perfectionism, it shows up in there's so many different ways to feel like nothing is ever good enough. Or maybe this looks like just getting so angry when somebody breaks a rule or they don't do something right. So struggle in flexible control. So another way to look at this might be like being rigid, like being like rigidity. So if this has been interesting so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. All right, let's move on to the third struggle point. So we've talked about receptivity and openness, talked about flexible control. Third struggle point is in the area of emotional awareness and emotional expression. So what does it look like to struggle with emotional awareness? Well, it's difficulty answering the question, how do you feel about that? Feel like you don't the words for it. Or maybe you tend to answer like it feels fine, or I don't know how it feels, or I don't really feel anything. Or maybe you even find that question frustrating or irrelevant. Why does it matter how I feel? That's one way that can show up. And then struggling with emotional expression, this might be a tendency just to be more constrained, even if the situation calls for more emotional expression. So maybe you're in a situation where everybody around you is really excited and you're like, yay. And people get frustrated because they're like, well, you don't seem very excited. Or maybe you're in a situation where everyone's really upset and you just don't seem as upset. And it's not to say that you're not as upset. You may really not be as upset, but also over controlled people are going to have a tendency to like, they're pissed and they're going to say, I was a little bit upset. I was a little bit disappointed. There's going to be this kind of minimizing of how you're feeling. And then there's also kind of always smiling even when you're upset. This doesn't apply to everybody, but kind of always smiling and like even if you're not happy, even if you're not feeling good, kind of like putting on the face. So that's the third struggle point. And the fourth struggle point is in the area of social connectedness. So this is going to look like kind of being more aloof and distant in social situations, maybe not initiating conversations, not being sure how to join in with other people, kind of hanging on the sidelines, maybe waiting for an invitation, being slow to warm up to other people. That's very much like people that are over controlled tend to be like, hold on a minute, I need to vet you, I need to know that you're okay before I just kind of let you in. And again, that's not always bad. It's good to be skeptical, it's good to be a little discerning. It's just a matter of degree. Like at what point is it healthy, at what point is it too much? And then envy and bitterness are common struggles for people that are over control. So I want to distinguish envy from jealousy really quickly. Jealousy involves three people. Envy involves two. So jealousy is what I would feel if, for example, I thought a third party was trying to like worm their way into my relationship. Like let's say I go to a restaurant and I don't know, I think my husband's flirting with the waitress and maybe I think he likes her better and I feel like, and either I have this fear that he's gonna leave me for her, or I have this fear that she is trying to like get in on the relationship. That's jealousy. Envy involves two people. Envy is wanting what someone else has. So let's say I think the waitress is prettier than me. I'm gonna feel envy. So difference between jealousy and envy. So envy, this feeling of wanting what everyone else has, or wanting what someone else has. Again, it's a normal human emotion. We all have it. This is not to say, oh, you feel envy, you must be over controlled. But it's a really big struggle for people that are over controlled in particular, really, really struggle with feelings of envy. And then bitterness. So bitterness is also a very common problem. And so we talk about in radically open DBT, which is one of the therapies that I do. We talk about how cynicism can turn into bitterness, and most over-controlled people are cynical. And cynicism's fine. Cynicism has its place. Cynicism has a value to society. And unchecked cynicism can sort of pave the way toward bitterness. And bitterness can really be a problem. Bitterness is something that just kind of sets in and sticks around, and it keeps people feeling hopeless. It keeps people feeling depressed. It keeps people feeling crappy in some kind of a way. So those are the four struggle points: receptivity and openness, flexible control, emotional awareness, emotional expression, and then social connectedness. So somebody might not struggle in all four of these necessarily, or they might not. And it could just be like one or two or three, but that's kind of what it looks like to have too much self-control. So what do you do? What do you do about over control? So let's say this resonates with you and it's causing problems in your life. That's the other question is it causing problems in your life? Because remember, you can be over controlled and still be happy and healthy. So when I work with people, we try to figure out, where has the over control gotten maladaptive? Where has it started working against you? And then dial it back just a little bit. So it doesn't have to be a huge change. I'm not going to take an over controlled person and flip them into their opposite, because I don't want to go from one extreme to the other extreme. We're just pulling it back just a little bit. How can we be adaptive over control? Because if you're over control, you're over control. It's who you are. That's not going to change. How can we do it in a way that's adaptive, that's functional, that works for you rather than working against you? So RODBT, radically open dialectical behavior therapy, was designed to address maladaptive over control. So it's a very structured and targeted treatment that's focused on behavior change. So I'm going to briefly just break down what each of these pieces mean. I'm going to start at the end and work my way back. So it's a behavioral therapy. What does that mean? So it's a therapy that posits that behavior is the source of somebody's distress, and that changing behaviors is going to help them feel better, help fix their problem. So there's something that someone is either doing or not doing that's what's getting in the way of them feeling the way they want to feel. So we target behaviors. We really look at changing behaviors. And then dialectic. So the word dialectic, it comes from philosophy, and I define it as holding two opposing things in your mind at the same time. And to illustrate this, I'm actually going to share, so kind of the classic dialectic that exists in therapy is acceptance and change. And so as a therapist, I strive to offer both acceptance and change. So I'm accepting people as they are, where they are, and I am pushing them to change at the same time. Because imagine if you only had one or the other. So if all I ever did was acceptance, if all I did was like validate and say I understand and say that makes sense, you would probably like me, and you also probably wouldn't see a lot of progress. But now let's say that all I do is push for change, and I never validate you, and I never focus on acceptance. You're going to feel like I'm not listening. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel like I don't understand, and like I don't understand how difficult it is to change. You need both. So we kind of have to, and we hold both. It's like I'm accepting you as you are, and I'm going to try to push you to change. And I'm still accepting you, and it's both. And then radically open, what does that mean? I could do a whole video about that. Maybe I will. But radical means complete and total all the way. So if we're going to be radically open, then this might look like I'm going to be willing to question the things that I've always assumed are true. Or I'm going to be open to trying something new or doing something a different way, or open to feedback, or open to new people, or open to change. Now, I talk about how being radically open does not mean that you are just going to be open 100% all the time to everything. You modulate the openness. You decide, how open do I want to be? And sometimes it's appropriate to be closed. Sometimes it's okay to be closed, but we're going to decide scenario by scenario. How open do I really want to be? So, all right. So I think that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I will link to a few blog posts down in the description that just go into more detail about RODBT. If this spiked your interest and you'd like to learn more, if you do happen to be located in the state of Texas, then you can go to my website to learn more about working with me, become a therapy client. If you're not located in the state of Texas, but this interests you and you'd like to pursue, maybe talk to somebody about doing RODBT, I'm also going to include, there's an international directory of therapists who are trained in, got the same training that I did, offer RODBT. And finally, subscribe to my newsletter. I send out a newsletter once a month that has kind of this pretty much the same content as what I have on my YouTube channel. All right, so I hope this was helpful. I hope this was interesting. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks for watching.